Step 2, designing. Let's have some fun. So this here is just a model. I'm just showing you what the page looks like. You're going to find for every hack 4 pages that are completely blank, which is where you're going to run your designs. And we're going to take a look at the 3-step process in the design. We're going to talk about the system and how to do that and how to link it all together. So let's get started. The first part is starting with an input. So we have a symbol, and we're going to talk about the nine symbol system on basically you start with an input. And it's really important that you understand what your inputs are because you have to start with something. You can't start with nothing. You got to start with something no matter what it is, and so that starts the design process. When we enter the design process, this is where we start to implement the design system. The design system is based on the 9 symbols, which we're going to talk about in a second here, and we lay them out. The system here that we use for the 9 symbols are these ones over here, and we're going to talk about them. They're broken down into basics and then specific elements. Now, the good news is that you're going to notice most of these are things that you're familiar with, and the reason being is that it comes from workflow mapping. So if you've been involved in continuous improvement, quality management, automation processes in manufacturing setting. This is used across the board, of course. It's not limited to any of the examples I'm giving. These are things that you're familiar with. There's some unique elements, though, that are related to growth hacking, and those are some of the ones on the right-hand side that we're going to talk about in a second. These are the basic ones. So the first ones we look at is the process, which is the rectangle. Okay. The next is the diamond, which is the decision, and then there's the input and output. Now, the input and output here, we use those specific arrows so that we're able to clarify and start an endpoint wherever they may be in the design and as creative as it might get. So we're not stuck with just a basic symbol that represents a start and end, which is the terminal, usually used in workflow language. In this particular case, we actually are very specifically defining the input and output for very specific reasons. The next are the supporting elements. So these are the very specific ones to the process. You have your basic flow arrow, that connects each part of the process. Now we get into some of the unique ones. Now, the double arrow going 2 ways, and that is integration. And integration is crucial because we're going to be working with different tools in different ways. And we need to show that there's going to be an integration at a certain point in the process. We do not define any of these things in the actual literal design. We will be doing that in the next step. So as you can see in the example, you just put those 2 arrows. You give it a label, and that is it. So whenever you drop these elements, you're putting the element, and you're just writing a label. You're not going into detail. The second one is repeat, okay? So if you have a cyclical process or a cyclical element to the growth hack, this is where you're going to use the arrows that go into a circle, and that symbolizes a repeat. The repeat may repeat 3 times, and it may have an infinite repeat. But then that leads us to the next one, which is limitations. If you notice, it's got 3 lines. The 3 lines are representative of a soft limit, a hard limit, and a knockout, okay? A soft limit is equivalent to, and we're going to use Instagram as an example here, and the numbers I'm using are just fabricated numbers, so just, don't go to Instagram and use the numbers I'm giving you. But the first would be, let's say, a soft limitation, sorry. And that soft limitation is essentially like you can only follow 100 people a day. And if you go to 101, you get a warning. And you get a certain amount of warnings until they move you to a hard limit, okay? So the hard limit could be equivalent to, say, 300 followers. So let's say you just go from 0 to 300. Instantly, you'd hit a hard limit. And you'd probably get a lot less warnings than you would with a soft limit. So a soft limit could have, hypothetically, 10 warnings. A hard limit could have 1 to 3 warnings, and then a knockout would be equivalent that you go from 0 followers to like 10,000 followers within an hour, and they would just shut your account down. That's a knockout, right? And these limitations are really important. So I want to emphasize a few really important points. You're probably wondering, well, why do I really care about these limitations? It's not about just execution, but how you actually design the growth hack itself. So if you want to think limitlessly, you need to understand what the limits are. The reason being is that you need to know where the different corners of limitations are in order for you to work around them. That's what a growth hack does. A growth hack is a shortcut to getting a result. And so if I understand where the limitations are, whether it be a soft, hard, or knockout limitation, I know how to work with it, and I know how to work around it, and I know how to game the system. That is what this is about. Finally, the last symbol is a stop sign for very obvious reasons. Not also do we want to understand certain limitations, but we need to know when we need to stop. A stop could be equivalent to a certain target. It could be a certain limitation. It could be the fact that you don't have a overall cyclical type of process where there has to be an end to it. And that's really important because we've run growth hacks in the past where we'll go into a platform, we're gaming the system, we understand the soft, the hard, and the knockout limits, but where do we want to actually end up with this? Because here's the thing, is if you just keep going, 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 and don't stop, eventually you'll get flagged, or something will be too visible that just doesn't make any sense, or something within the system that you've developed in the growth hack is not sustainable. So understanding where that stop is, if there is a stop, okay, you don't have to always have one, but it's important to understand if there is one, where to actually put it and what it might mean. Finally is the output, and we're still using the Instagram example. By the way, this is not exclusive to technology only. You can integrate all kinds of things into your design and growth hacks. The best of growth hacks are cross-functional growth hacks, and those, I've talked about that in the blueprint in Ready, Set, Growth Hack. So a cross-functional growth hack is essentially where it brings in many different elements. So it's no longer just code and marketing. It could be code, marketing plus operations, or code, marketing plus human resources, or strategy, or R&D, or whatever function you're bringing into play. So it doesn't necessarily have to be technology. The reason that we talk about tech is essentially an accelerator, right? And that's why we talk a lot about technology when it comes to growth hacking, because ultimately, once we develop a growth hack, we want to be able to automate and scale that thing and then finally turn it into full-scale operations. So the output is super important because we want to know what we're getting at the end of this, right? We can't just keep going in circles, moving, but we don't know what we're looking for at the end. And so the objective of this, and this is a 12-part sequence, we're going to talk about this sequence, I'm looking for followers. And so I would state that I'm looking to hit 10,000 followers or 100,000 followers. And so we would know exactly where that target is, and that would be the output. Super, super important. Don't forget the output.